Hello and welcome back to Web Design for Small Business. In this video, part 26, menu, we're going to be creating the menu category for our website. So what we need to do for this part is we need to add every single item that's on their menu. So because this is a restaurant, it's basically a list of food items with their associated prices and broken up into different categories. There's other items that we can do, such as tags for whether it's spicy, if you want like gluten-free, or allergy alerts like dairy. There's different things we can do for that as well. But it all starts by basically adding items into our database. So we have our menu that we had created when we first did our database. So opening that up, we see that we have the following fields: ID, category, name, price, items, description, image, and flags. So what we need to do is we need to create a file that has basically those values. Now we could add them all manually in here, simply hitting that insert button at the top, and you can add them one at a time. That would take forever. So what we're going to do is, I've already created the database in Microsoft Excel. Now, because Microsoft Excel is a paid program, there are multiple choices that you have for similar programs that are free. You can use Google Docs. There are also two different variants of free Office software programs, one called OpenOffice and one called LibreOffice. That's Libre. And they all basically work the exact same. I think they're usually called calc for the Excel-like spreadsheets. But basically what you want to do is create a new spreadsheet. If it has multiple pages, you want to delete all of them but one, so that you just have one basic spreadsheet. And then you basically want to write all your information out and then set the columns to match the columns in your database. So clicking on the structure, basically the first column needs to be the ID, the second column the category, third the name, fourth the price, fifth items. So with the items, what I was thinking there was, because they have combo plates, you would basically put the individual items, you would create individual items and then add those to the combo. So the combo would be one of the ID and names, and then you would add the stuff that's in it to the items. But I'll show you what I'm talking about when I get there. Description, so basically just a little blurb about what's in it. For the specific case of a restaurant, I was thinking a list of ingredients. Now, you never want to be too specific with ingredients when it comes to food, because that's giving away your recipes, but having the actual ingredients in it is important for people who have allergies. So it's one of those legal things you need to be able to tell people what's in it anyway. So if they can see what's in it, then they know if they can eat it or not. And then an image of it. Now, I don't have any images currently. I'm told that I will be getting some at some point to add later. So I will probably just add placeholder images for now. And then the flags, as I mentioned before, kind of the only one I have right now is if something is hot or spicy, but we might add more later. So that's basically it, the 8 columns. So I need to add a field in here, which is size. So add one column after name. this will be size, and that will be a tiny text. Coalition UTF-8, and default is none. For whatever reason, the MySQL server is running really slow. Okay, so that's updated and should now match my columns here. So now what I need to do is export this in a way that can be imported into my database. So what we go is we file and save as. You might have to hunt down where that is depending on the program. And it might not be save as, it might be export, depending on the program again. But basically you should get some kind of save field and save as type. And we want this to be CSV or comma separated value. Save that. And preserve the features. Yeah, so keep the format. We want it in a CSV, so hit yes. And now we should have that. And if we go into here, we go into import. And character set of the file at UTF. And the CSV file that we just saved. Open that up. Partial import doesn't matter. Enable foreign key checks doesn't really matter. The format, keep that as CSV. You can see there are other types. So you can save it as an SQL file, XML if you're using OpenOffice. The Open Document spreadsheet is actually a default one in here. But we're just doing CSV, which is the default. Format specific options. We don't really need to do any of that. It should just all be the default. And just hit go. Column names, if you actually labeled the columns. Invalid column count in CSV put on line 1. So click on browse, nothing was imported. Okay, and it just adamantly refuses to do that. So what we need to do is we need to open that in a program that's not Microsoft Excel, because Microsoft Excel is being a worthless piece of crap. So right-clicking on the file, opening with Notepad++, and you see we get our comma-separated values. So now all we need to do is literally go through this list and add a comma to the front of every line. Okay, so there we go. Make sure that there's no blank line at the bottom. And now there's a comment in front of everything. You can save that. This is one of the reasons why I said you should keep Notepad++, even if you're not going to use it as your primary programming software, because it comes in really handy for stuff like that. Okay, so that's saved, and now we can try to import that again. file, our CSV, UTF-8, CSV, go. And import has successfully finished 97 queries executed. So being able to type it out in a spreadsheet just makes it so much faster to get the data down. If you need to edit it, do anything like that, it's just so much faster. And then being able to import it into the database. So if we hit browse, we should now see our full database in there. Perfect. So it automatically gave us all of our ID numbers. Show all. That little warning was if you have like millions of entries. We have dozens, so not a big deal. Yeah, so these combos at the bottom, the dinner for one, the name of it, and then basically for the items, I'm going to go in and add the ID for each of the items that are in it. So I'll still have to do that, but I can do the rest of them for now. So now basically we have our category, we have the name of each item, the size. So some of them are numbers like 1 egg roll, 2 spring rolls. So that's what you get for the price. The prices are all listed there. Anything that you see that has a $0 price, that means that it's simply not sold separately. It's only part of one of the combos. And that's a way that you can detect whether it's in a combo or not. So basically, for our code, what we'll do is we'll have it pull up, say, everything that's in the category appetizers, and then we'll have it list all of them. However, if it doesn't show a price like this one, it will exclude that one. So it'll only pull up the ones that have a price set. And that's how we can make sure that we're not displaying these guys. So now what we need to do is go in and write that code. So going to our index, or into our NetBeans, we will open up the menu.php item. So the first thing we need to do is we need to change the title for menu to our menu constant. And then we can delete the placeholder. And then we're going to create I'm trying to think the best way to do this. Probably we could do panels within panels, but that might look a little weird. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a call span. So div class equals, close the div, and this will be call small dash 4, because we're going to do 3 columns. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. And create another div underneath that, and this one is going to be a well, and it's going to have a ID equals to appetizers. And then it's going to be the variable appetizers put in there. And then what we'll have to do is create our appetizers. The idea, I'm going to change that to all lowercase. Sorry. Save that. So this is what we'll start with. So now what we need to do is we're going to start doing the PHP to actually pull up our menu items. So get m or menu is equal to MySQL underscore query parentheses semicolon inside the parentheses our database. Sorry, 45 DB, and then comma double quotes inside the double quotes. Select all from menu where category no, we'll just select all for menu. We'll just pull the entire menu down. Okay. Mnum is equal to 0. And while mnum is less than no $, MySQL underscore num underscore rows, parentheses, inside the parentheses, get m curly bracers. After that first curly bracers, mnum plus plus semicolon to increment our mnum. So then mi for menu item is equal to MySQL underscore fetch underscore assoc curly bracer, or sorry, parentheses and semicolon. Inside the parentheses is the get m. So that pulls up our menu item. So then m is equal to MySQL fetch assoc get m. So that calls the row, and then what we're going to do is start divvying these up. So we need to create a switch. And that becomes m category. Okay, so basically depending on which category it is, we go case, and I just need to check to see how I spelled them. So I did use a capital as the first letter. So case appetizers. So if it's in the category appetizers, then add it to the appetizers field and then break. And then we'll do one of these for each category. So appetizers soup. Fried rice. Now note when I look for it here, because it has a space in the name, which really I should know better and I shouldn't have put spaces in it, but it is written with the space there because this is just a string, right? And then the variable obviously can't have a space, so I'm just going to use camel caps for that. Chow mein. I wanted the database to look a lot more legible, which is why I did it with the spaces. Chop suey. Beef chicken. And now I'm going to copy the beef one because it has less letters, so there's less I need to delete each time. Pork, shrimp, egg foo young, hot and spicy, side orders, and then our 2 combo sections. Okay, so pork, shrimp, egg foo young, hot and spicy. Side orders. Dinner for 1. And group dinner. Okay, so now you can basically mirror these into here, remembering which ones go in which columns because we're going to have 3 columns. So first I will copy that and paste it 3 times, or 2 times, and 1 more at the top because this one is actually going to be full width one. Appetizers, this one is chicken. And this is the dinner for 1. Okay, so the main two we want to focus on are these two here, but we're going to go back up to here for now. I'm just going to save that. Okay, because right now they don't even output anything. So we can either do this one of two ways. We can either use actual tables, or we can try to work within the div span arena, and that's what I'm going to do for now, because all our menu items have are the item name and the price, and then we're going to add buttons after that. So I'm going to just do simple spans for that. So each row will be in a div. And the ID for that div will be the ID. And I will give it item hyphen and then the ID. Then we're going to create a span and just give this a class of lowercase m, and then I'm going to do camel caps, so name. End span. Within this span, I'm going to go m square brackets, inside the square brackets, name, then another span, give this one a class is equal to double quotes m price, and in here I'm going to put a dollar sign, and then I'm going to put the m square brackets price, because our prices are numbers but they don't actually include that dollar sign. Then I'm going to add another span. Now if you find this is actually getting long, which it probably will, what we can do is we can break the appetizers down to the next line, break the break down to the next line, and then we can actually break it at our span points here. Breaking this div down. Like that. And then if you further want to break it down so each span was on its own line, you could do that too. Now the reason why it does that joiner, so if you wanted to keep that in, you can. Basically it's just a single quote on either end, so at the end of that to the beginning of this, and then one or the other has to have a dot, and it basically means that this is joined to this, and the only difference between having that and not having that is when it's printed out and basically read, it's read as an entire string, whereas the way that I do it, where I delete that to make it kind of cleaner, it recognizes that there is white space here, and that can affect how the script prints out. So if it bothers us, we can add those back in. But I like to kind of keep it cleaner, and that just adds characters. So, okay. Next span. So this one we're going to give a class equals to an order, or an add, I should say. Add so with the add, we're going to create an icon. So pull up a font awesome, and there's a plus square and a minus square. Solid or regular. And I think I like the regular ones a little bit better, so I will use plus square and minus square in regular. So that fast becomes far. Copy that line, paste it in again. That's going to be sub, m sub, and the plus is going to be changed to minus. And in the span class, I'm also going to add text success, and to the sub text danger to give it the default green and red for adding and subtracting. Okay, and then I'm actually just going to switch those two around, so I'm going to cut the bottom one, paste above, so we have subtract on the left and add on the right, and then I'm going to create another field between those two, and this one is going to be span with an ID is equal to, and this is going to be M capital Q, and between the spans the number 0. So basically we can subtract, we can add, and our number's there, and we're going to use JavaScript to control this. So now what we can do is I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to paste that under our M. Give it a new semicolon at the back, and in front of it I'm going to write menu item. Or actually menu row, I'm going to call it. No, I'm going to shorten it to M row. Yeah, keep it simple. Okay. Okay, so we get our M, we create our M row, and then basically for each of these, all we need to do is add that M row. So depending on the category, we stick it into that category. So after appetizers, we have soup. Copy the soup one because it's shorter. And then on this row we have fried rice, chow mein, chop suey, and beef. That, and our next row, or sorry, next column starts with chicken, and then we have pork, and obviously for yours this is going to be completely different. Spicy. Chicken, pork, shrimp, egg foo young. Hot and spicy, and sides. And there isn't another one there. Okay. Now, because the group dinners and the dinner for ones are slightly different, I'm going to leave those for now. I just want to go in and test it now to see what this looks like. So if I refresh my menu page, so far so good. So each of the different categories, I have one here that is blank, which means that I mistyped something. The hot and spicy, so that is the egg foo young. So I'm going to take a look at the egg foo young. So our egg foo young. Oh, because I forgot to delete beef out of there. So save that. Actually, I can close that. I don't need that anymore. Refresh this. That field there now has stuff in it. Perfect. Okay. So seeing what we got there. So one thing we need to add in here is after the M, we need to do a check. If M price doesn't exist. No, sorry. If M price exists, then do the rest of this. And I'm going to save that and just see what it does. Okay, so stuff that still has the $0 value is still there, so that's not going to work. So if price is greater than 0, and now it's gotten rid of the extra ones. There we go. Okay, so after the m equals and we get our m variable, we also want to just set it so that we can use it later as m id is set to m. So basically what this does, I'm going to change that to mi. Change this to mi, that to m. Mi. Everywhere where we have m, we're adding an I, because there's not that many of them. Okay. And then straight up m is equal to mi, id is equal to mi. So what we're doing is we create the now mi variable, which is the entire row, and we're creating a variable in an array, which we will actually add up here. M is equal to array So what we're doing is we have our M array, which is empty, and we're adding an ID class to it. So that basically is the key for the first row, and then adding our row to that. So basically this M becomes every single menu item, and they're organized by their ID, because we will need this when we're working out our group ones for all the different items that are listed in it. So we need to create that variable. We're not going to use it right now, but we need to have it created. I'm going to put it on the same row as that just to save some space. Okay, so saving that. Now what we want to do is we want to go into our CSS and actually start formatting these out. And as well, I also want to add a header to each of those. H3 I'm thinking. I'm just going to test to see what that looks like. Okay, there's a lot of extra space up here that I want to get rid of. Otherwise that works. Also, I want to italicize that. And these names, we're going to actually create constants for them. So I'm just going to change that to H5 because I know I haven't used H5 for anything yet. So they can have their own kind of custom styling. Because I'm going to need to give these guys quite a bit of CSS. Soup. Fried rice. Chow mein. Remember that the constants, when we make a constant, the spacing should be with underscores. And everything else should be all caps. Okay. Now, one other thing I want to do is I want to give this a parent div. I'm going to call it restaurant menu, restaurant-menu, because the actual name menu is used so often in Bootstrap classes for the actual menu styling, so I don't want to confuse that with our literal restaurant menu. So I'm going to be very specific there. And then I'm going to give it a class of a row. And that just semi-affects how the columns work. Okay, so now that that's sorted, go back here, refresh that, and there we go. So it's smaller, it's all caps because those constants aren't defined yet. So 2 parts. First we can go and create the constants. I'm going to do it in English first, and then I'll go through and translate after we're all done. I'll probably do that offline. I'm going to put it above our error messages, lower location here, call that menu, and define. So the first one is appetizers. Quick one that I can copy and paste. Save myself a little bit typing. Fried rice. Chow mein. Chop suey. hateful young. Hot and spicy. And note that for the ampersands, I'm doing the ampersand amp semicolon, symbol for the ampersand. And the last one here is side order. Save that. I'm going to have to add more, so I'll just leave that open. Back to our menu. Tabbing back over, hitting refresh, and those should now be not all caps. So it accepted our constants. Okay, so now we go into our CSS and we create some CSS for this. So the first thing is I want to do my H5 class that I just added. And we want the color to be our red. Font weight bold. Font style to be italic. Font size. I'm going to go with 28 pixels just to see what that's like. And just save that. Refresh. So I think these are a little big still, so I'm going to shrink that down a bit. I'm going to try 22 the same as our H4. I like that a lot better, so I'm going to keep that. I want these all centered. That is text align center, spelled the American way. There, and then I want to give it a margin of 0 and padding of 0. Because I want it as high up as possible to take up as little vertical space as possible. I want some space on the bottom. Give it kind of a half line underneath it. So since we went with 22 for our text size, I went 11 for the padding. So that looks a lot cleaner. Okay, so now what we want to do is get these divs aligned. So this span really should be fine by itself. We shouldn't have to actually do anything to that. We might want to make the text bold just to kind of really make it pop a bit more. So for that stuff, we're going to go down to the bottom. Restaurant menu. Div dot well. Okay, so now one thing I wanted to do within our menu here is change these wells into panels. With the well, basically the background color starts as our kind of gold, but it's a gradient from darker to lighter if you look at it carefully. And I find it just darkens it a little too much. It makes it a little too difficult to read. So I want it to be the same color as our background, and changing these from wells to panels should be what we need to do for that. So I'm going to do that. A quick way to do that, Control H. If you have something highlighted, it automatically puts that in the first box, which is what we want. So well, and replace with panel. And if you just hit next, it'll highlight the first one, and then you can just replace down the line and then save and refresh. And you'll note two things. Number one, the background changed to the same color as the rest of our page background. So now all we have are our nice green borders. And it actually got rid of all of our previous padding that we had. So that is nice, but now we kind of want to add some of that padding back. But we can do that within our CSS now. Okay, so all we had to do for that, pound restaurant hyphen menu space div.panel space, and then in curly bracers padding colon 11 pixels semicolon. Now the reason why I chose 11, that was the same number that we did for the padding between the top of our title and the bottom, which was half the size of that text. And that just gives it a nice small but crisp border. And if we zoom down, it keeps it the same size, and it's fairly nice like that. I'm guessing that has to do with our div class row here, so I'm just going to delete that and refresh. And it's still giving us some wonky stuff there. It has everything to do with this one here. I'm going to try changing that to small since all the rest are labeled as small. Quirks of using, yeah, there we go. So it was because we had that as extra small when we had the other ones as small that it was popping out really weird. Alright, So now we want to align those guys to the right. And a simple way of doing that, we can either make them all align to the right, or we can put them all within a block and then just align that block to the right. I'm just going to call this menu right. Save that. Then go to our CSS and create a class for our menu right. Code right. And as you can see, it works well for the first one and then breaks for each consecutive one after. So we need to do a couple things. So after our item div, we add a break. Style is equal to pair both. And that fixes that alignment issue. However, it also creates an extra space. So instead of a break, I'm just going to make this an I and clear out that I. No, it doesn't like that. If I take this and put it here. There we go. So fix that by basically just, instead of putting it after the div, put it within the div after that span. So it breaks it out onto a new line, but because there's nothing else there, it clears it out so we don't have the extra space. So there we go. So now that's right aligned. Our other stuff is left aligned. It's all very neat and tidy. I am going to throw another wrench in this, and after this price, I'm going to add another span. And just call that order. Span. So within the menu right, we have our price, and then we have this order block, which has the plus, minus, and the number. Refresh that, make sure it all still works. So what that does is it gives us a quick thing where if you cannot order online, we just remove those buttons and it gets rid of all of it. So then it will just give us the names and prices. We don't have to worry about anything else. Okay, so now the problem that you see is that when we have a line of text or the name of a menu item that's too long, what it does is it ends up popping the price and quantity down a line. and letting that take up the full width. And what we want is we want to keep these as separate columns, with this basically breaking underneath that. So in order for us to accomplish that, go back here, and basically what we're going to do is our two main spans here, the name and the menu right, we're going to give those column classes. So call hyphen, and we're going with extra small and -6 and a space. And we're going to call this before we call that, so that way if we need to apply stuff to it, this will overwrite that where it needs to. So doing that, save that, and we go back, refresh. So now you see it breaks it up into two columns. However, this one basically now kind of ignores that float right. So what we need to do there is go into our CSS, and where we have this float right, we want to change this to text align right, and refresh that, and there you go. Now it aligns it to the right, and you can see where it's too long, it'll pop it down a line and not affect that. So that is much better. So now the next thing that we need to address is when our menu goes down and we shrink it down, you notice that this gets really messy on this side, and so do these. So two things here. Number one, we're going to want this to pop from the 3 columns down to 1 column a lot sooner. So we're going to change that from small to medium, just go one size up essentially. And then we're going to create some CSS code to make these 3 elements, so the quantity elements, stick together, so that way when it pops it, it'll split between the price and our quantity. So going back here, what we need to do, these columns here need to go from small to medium. So MD instead of SM. And keep it consistent amongst all of them. Save that. And then with our span class order, we go to our CSS dot order, and this is white hyphen space colon no wrap, all one word, semicolon. Save that and refresh. Okay, so now if we break this down, notice two things. Number one, our prices then break away from our quantities, so our quantities are good, and as we get really small, it pops there instead of when we're extra small. So that's a lot cleaner now. And we can move on to formatting up these other two now. Now we could write a script where it decreases the size if it's beyond a set number of characters. but then it starts affecting things, and I don't really like doing that if I can avoid it. I don't mind it breaking it out onto a second line, especially when you get stuff like this where it's just that long. The other option would be using fewer columns. Because, I mean, realistically, we could have this all in just one column. But I'm trying to mimic what their printed menu looks like as closely as possible, just to remain consistent. So what you see here is exactly what you see on the printed menu, and thus going from one to the other, you can't get lost because everything's in the same place. You can't get lost because everything's in the same place. Alright, so we will start with these. Actually, let's start on this side since this one's going to be a lot easier to do. So going back to our menu.php and scrolling down to where we have our dinner. H5. And we're creating a new constant, dinner for 1. Save that, go to our language page and create a new definition. Save that, go back to our menu. And basically for this one, we're going to do different things to this. So now, going back into this, we need to kind of rework the way that we're doing this because it's not very future-proofed like this. It works for now, but we need to adjust it. So what we're going to do is this set of curly braces, so our while statement, we need to end up here. So I'm going to delete that one and put it here. Then, right after this curly bracer, I'm going to create a for each statement. For each m as mi. And then put that curly bracer back. And now basically this all runs from within this. So essentially everything is the exact same as it was before. However, the main difference is we now have this complete list cycled through. So we have a list of every item as M with an ID that we can draw from. Before we were doing it on the fly. So this gives us a lot more options for what we can do, which is what we need to do next. Okay, so the next item is put a new line between these two, and in here we need to check to see if mi items, so if there's anything listed in our items, then we need to do something. And what we need to do is get those items and put them into a variable. So m items is equal to and we want to go str underscore get CSV, parentheses, semicolon, inside the parentheses, we want our MI items. So our MI items variable should be a set of ID numbers for the items that are used in that combo dish, and they should be comma separated values. So then what we do is we break that out into this array. So this M items becomes an array of the different item IDs. So then once we have that, we go for each, and M items as M with a capital I and curly bracers. So for each M items as MI, we're going with MINC for menu includes, dot equals to and inside here href is equal to double quotes pound mi hyphen single quotes, dots inside the single quotes, and in here we go M MI. So our ID number. Okay, and then in there, I'm actually going to put a comma after this closing anchor. And then in between the anchor tags, we put single quotes, double dots, and $M, square brackets, inside the square brackets, $MI. So what we're doing is we're calling this guy, and we want the ID that matches this one. And then after that, another pair of square brackets, single quotes, and name. So we're calling the name of the item with that ID. And then this becomes a link to that. So now that we have the href, we also need a data toggle equals modal. Because we're basically turning this into a link. That said, now that we're doing that here, we're going to do the same thing here. So with this name, we're going to do the same. So A on that side, A on that side, data toggle equals modal, href is equal to that, pound mi hyphen breakout single quotes and dots, and mi ID. Okay. So two things. Number one, we don't have an minc variable yet, but we're adding to it. So we want to create that. So we can create that up here. So just minc is equal to nothing. And then after our for each, we want to then go minc is equal to chop minc, comma, single quotes, comma. So we want to chop the last comma off of that. And actually I'm going to add some white space there. I'm going to create a space, so it's comma space, each one. And then this where I'm chopping will also be comma space. So that's what it cuts off of the end. And then I'm going to dot single quotes and add a break after that. Alright, so I'm going to save that and see what that looks like. It shouldn't have changed much of anything, except now we should see our names as links. This part won't work because we don't actually have, or at least I don't have any items listed yet. So I'm going to refresh that. Yeah, so these are all clickable links now. And I'm going to go through and change the color on those links. So I want to go pound restaurant menu space A comma restaurant menu space visited. Color pound. So make it green. Over. Signs instead of pounds. Of course. There we go. So each of these things is now clickable. And we'll create a modal pop-up that does not exist yet because we still have to do that. And now let's add some of our dinners. So adding that in, we should now have the first one set. So I'm going to refresh this page and nothing shows up, because we never actually added that. So now that we have this minc created, what we need to do is .m inc and .m inc for those two. I'm going to get rid of those commas altogether and just add a break there. So save that, and then first of all, fix that. And then because I'm switching from how I use the MI there to how I'm using it here, all I'm going to do here is just create a thing where I'm clearing out the MI to make sure that that is no longer being used. Save that. Pop that down to another line. These a class is equal to, sorry, double quotes, MII. And in CSS at the bottom here, dot MII. Text align center. Okay, so I want to make, I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to put this in a span. Give the span the class like that. Go back here. Width 100%. So if I go to our menu and I give this a class of call small 12. That then centers it. Because we're using the calls there, it expects the same calls here. So that's why it was only using up the width of the first column. Now the other thing we want to do is for these dinner for ones, we want to make this bold and red. Okay, so this minc is equal to blank, where we blank that out. We need to cut that, and we need to put it on the other side of our if statement. Or we can put it after this row, but it needs to come before our if statement, because basically what's happening is if it has items, then we clear it out and create a new one. If it doesn't, then we just leave it, so this never gets cleared out, and the one that was in the first one gets put into every other one. So we need to clear that out each time, regardless of whether or not it has items. So that's why it was duplicating. Okay, so that's saved, and we can just quickly refresh to make sure that fixed it, and sure enough, yeah, now only number 1 has the items. So that did indeed fix it. Now we want to change those ones. Class is equal to blank, and in here you do that, and we're giving it a variable called red, because why not? So then what we need to do is above our row, we need to check if that should be red. Which, honestly, okay, I'm going to restructure this a bit. I'm going to put this guy up there. Going to cut this and paste this here. So even though our row is being displayed before our mInc, we can actually write our mInc first. And then in here, because this is where we check to see if we have items, so we don't have to duplicate that work, we can create our red in here. And again, because we're creating a red variable, we need to make sure it starts as blank each time. And then we just need to add a class of menu-red. Save that. And then we create that class. So dot menu-red. And we want color £700, and we're going to make this important just because we have a lot of things overriding other things. Font weight, we're going to make that bolder. Checking to see what our default font size is. We don't actually have that listed anywhere. So I'm going to spy with my little eye what that is. So we go here, just right click, inspect, go to computed. So line height is 20 pixels, font size is 14 pixels. So we want it a little bit bigger than that, so I'm going to go with probably, I'll start with 18 and might change it down to 16. Font size 18 pixels. And then I'm going to also create a menu red hover and give this a color of pound green basically. Okay, refresh this. Okay, so that's larger now. When we hover over it, however, it doesn't actually change the color because we need to make this important as well. Save that, refresh it again, and there we go, now it's green. And I'm going to make the price there also have the menu red. So in here, red and price class. I'm going to give that a space and put in red. Save that. And I want to give mPrice so our price here, I'm going to give that a bold effect as well. And I think I'm going to give this, no, I'm fine with that. Okay. I'm going to change this to 16 though. I think that's a little too big. Okay, so in here, change this to 16. want my M price to be, I'll put it under menu right here, M price. Remember, the lower on the hierarchy, the more priority it has, so I don't want this to overwrite these things. And font, weight, bold, spell bold properly. Refresh. There we go. Just makes them a little bit easier to read. And how do those look when we scale it down? They're fairly large. I do want to make these bigger though. So I'm going to do a general restaurant menu, font size, and I'm going to make that 16 pixels. And then change this one back to 18. Okay, so that reads a lot nicer. However, we're getting a lot more rollover there. So it took away most of our spare room. Okay, so as you can see now, what I did was I made this menu box wider, and by making it wider, I gave myself a lot more space to work with, so now everything is laid out a lot more nicely. Even if I shrink it down, you'll notice that before it used to pop a lot more, and now it remains relatively consistent. And everything still has plenty of space to work with. So it's looking really nice now. And this effect actually passes through to all the other pages. So if we go back to our location page, notice it has a lot more space. Our map is a lot wider now. Our create account is bigger. The login box stays the same. But we have a lot more space for things. Now, how I did that is basically, if we look at our page, the main body of our website after our menu is this container here. So this container fluid was what was controlling the size of our page as we expand it and contract it, and it was set to those are Bootstrap default classes, and they basically have those standard constraint sizes, so the extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large, and as you go in and out of those sizes, it'll pop to the next size and have different constraints for each size. But after that, we gave it the idea of page content. So what I did was I applied some CSS to our page content. So looking at that, going to our CSS, I put it, we have our import, our font, body, our H tags, our kind of colors, bold and italic, and I put it there just above our header. And what I did was I gave it a width of 100%, so it takes up 100% of that, removed the margin entirely, so zeroed out the margin, and then gave it a padding of 1 VW space 5 VW space 5 VW space 5 VW. So this is the top, right, bottom, left, and the top I wanted If you have it at 0, basically where this fade effect stops is right where it would end. And because that fade effect drops down quite a bit, you notice how where I have it, it's relatively squared. And I just kind of roughly estimated that at about 1 view width, because 0, which is where I started, was a little too high. So I brought it down, and it has a pretty good ratio there for being equal on all sides. The bottom could come up a little bit or down. It really doesn't matter. There's nothing there. And then the sides, basically I gave it 5, so basically 5% on either side, so this takes up 90% of the screen width. And because I'm using viewable width, it scales with the page and does so relatively smoothly. So there we go. So that fixed all of that. Allowed us more space to make our larger font work, which in turn makes our buttons larger, so they're easier to press without pressing other things. So it works out really well. Another thing I want to do though is I do want to give a little bit more spacing between these, because you don't want to be trying to click on that and clicking the one under it, because you have the fat fingers. So while we have enough space horizontally, we need more space vertically, and that is simply a matter of line height. So here where we have restaurant menu font size 16, I'm just going to add line height of 18 pixels and see how that looks. So barely noticeable difference, so I'm going to increase that to 24. Refresh that. That gives a pretty decent gap. I might go up to 32, so making the line height double the font height. And yeah, I think I'm going to keep that. I don't necessarily need it here, so we can adjust that there, which is in our MII. So it's this one here. With a new line. Refresh. And that makes it shrink down. Okay, so just replacing our break with a new line tag. So the break was giving it a full line with the default line height, and breaks really don't like to take formatting, so instead we just created a new line, so it just dropped down to the next line, maintaining our formatting. And then we get that cinched up a little bit tighter. And then what we can do is add a break at the end of that if we really want to. But I'm not going to bother because I know that we'll get enough spacing with this guy here. Hopefully. Okay, so now what I want to do is go ahead and add the other items into these ones here. Okay, now the super sad thing is I actually missed a menu item that goes between these two. There's actually a honey garlic pork as well as the honey garlic ribs and the ginger pork. So I want that to show up in the order that it is on the menu. So I actually need to insert it between these two, but you can't because of the way that the numbering is. So what I'm going to do is, because I still have all of this in my CSV, I'm going to actually just redo my CSV and add it in here and then re-import everything. So simply checking all and deleting. It's going to seem very sad, but now it's empty again. Now, if it gives me any issues because of the numbering, because it'll automatically start at the increment where I had it before, so we go into operations and you can change that auto increment back to 1 and hit go. Because that is a lot easier than trying to number them individually. And now because this field isn't blank, it shouldn't give us issues when we export it either. And then I want to make sure that I insert my line here where I need it to be. Insert. Basically just select one, shift select down there, and then just drag this back down to the bottom again, and it will update those numbers for me. Okay, so while I'm here, and F was the items, I might as well add my items while I am here. So also has 59. 3 also has 59. That one, so they put a comma after it. Just a number. Okay, so then beef with mixed greens. 39. 39. 39. Isn't all of them except the second last one. Last one here is fried rice. 24. 24. 24. 24. It's the last ingredient in all of them. Okay. Number 2 should start chicken balls. 46. And number 9. Okay. Deep fried shrimp. 66. Number 5. Okay. Number 4. Egg roll, which is number 1. And dried garlic ribs. Number 4. And number 7. Okay, so 4 has 4 items, 5 has 3 items, 6 ginger beef, 44. tricky. 1 and 9. Well, this we did solid work. Screens, 59. And chicken fried rice. 15. Solid work. 39, 15, in between there. We got some sour chicken balls, which is 2, that's 4 to 6. 9, 3, 4, 9, 4. Dry garlic ribs. 5. Beef with mixed greens. 40. Sweet and sour chicken balls. 47. Chicken chow mein. 25. And chicken fried rice. 16. 195. Deep fried jumbo shrimp. 68. Full sweet sour pork. 61. Beef with mixed greens. 41. Sweet and sour chicken balls. 48. And chicken fried rice. 17. 196. Go. 68. 61. Dry garlic ribs. 6. And the last 3. 41, 48, 17. Okay, so those are all added, and I just want to explain this part here. So with these dinners for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, this first comma separated group, I needed to make another basically array within the array, so I used a different separator using the bar. We can break that out into another array just as easily. But basically what this means is they can either have they have a choice here, so they can either have menu item 1 or menu item 9, and there's 2 of those options. In this one there's 3 of those options, 4, 5, and 6. So basically the number 1 is a egg roll, and number 9 is a small wonton soup. So each person, the dinner for 2, you can either have 2 wonton soups, 2 egg rolls, or 1 of each, and goes on like that. So I needed a way to be able to know that and be able to make the code for that after. So that's what I had to do for that. So that's why it has those, and that's what that's for. And if you need to be able to create options, this is a good way of doing that. So that is saved again. Don't save. I'm going to import it now. Alright, so there are our menu items. Perfect. All right. Okay, so I am just going to go back to our page here and give this a refresh and see what our page looks like now. So you can see our dinners did the same thing. Up at the top here, ran out of space apparently for the last one, which is some formatting oops, but we haven't actually formatted this one, so I'm not going to worry about that at all. What I'm worried about is this guy here, which, as you can see, the same thing happened there. So that's not so good. So I'm guessing what I'm going to need is actually having a break after each one of those. Yes, reload that. Okay, so going into our menu, and where we add this guy, we have that. We create the break there, but we're going to need a break after all of that too. So here, after our M ink, I guess we can do it one of two ways. After our for each, we'll put it here. So all we're going to do is M ink dot equals 2, and we're going to do a break style equals clear both. Just like we had here, we're going to put that up here, semicolon after that. Yeah. Save that, and that should hopefully fix this, which it did. And it fixed it up there too. And then it just gives us a little bit more of a space in between the last item there and the start there. So that's good. That is looking nice. All right. Not too crazy about that changing color. Let's see if we can fix that. So what is our price listed at? M price red. Span dot menu red dot m price. I'm going to just switch those back around, save that. Okay, so what I want to do here is span dot m price dot menu red hover color pound 700 important. Save that. Refresh this. And now when we hover over those ones, it doesn't change, because we don't want our prices changing color when we hover over them. to make people think that they can somehow change the prices. Not good. Okay, so that works. Now we need to fix this top one. And first we're going to work on the layout, then we'll work on the functionality. So we still have to do boxes for these and put the script in for these guys to actually create our orders. But we want the layout to be as we want it first. So working on this guy. So we have 5 columns. That we have 5 items, and we want each item to be in a column. 2 through 6 is 5. And we have 12 spaces to work with. So essentially what we need to do is make it so that each one of these takes up 2 column widths with a gap of 1 on either side. And then hope that doesn't look horrible or squish it too much. So that's what we're going to shoot for. I'm scrolling through my CSS here. I don't need that menu. So if mi category is set to group dinners, then we want to do something special. Dot equals to span class equals call slash mid slash 2 actually easier way of doing this, get rid of all that. So what we'll do down here is where we have our mrow and our minc, we will just create spans within here. And then we need additional ones before and after. So going to our group dinner here, we'll just add those. Front and one at the back, and save that and refresh. So it did it, but it really didn't like the way we did it. So what we also want to do here is at the end of this span, we're going to add another break with our style of clear both. Refresh that. And that looks horrible. So we're going to remove it from there. And we're going to put it at the end here. There we go. So as I completely feared, it gave a lot there and it really pushed these into each other. So what we're going to have to do there if we shrink it down enough, it should break them out into the vertical spacing where it looks normal again, and we're not so super sad about it. We also need to give this one a title, which we didn't do yet. So in front of this span, we're going to do an H5. Dinners, save that, go to here, and I'm going to put it at the top here. Save that. Got that, and we need to create a class. So we have this as ID group dinner, and then we have spans underneath it. So that's what we want. So we go here, pound group dinners. I want to make sure it's plural. Group dinner, singular. Space span, and we need to go margin 0, padding 0, and just see where that leaves us. So we're going to hit refresh on that. And it kind of worked, but really didn't. So the way that they have it on theirs is they have the title at the top, the price and quantity will be at the bottom. So we'll do it similarly, but probably just break these two into separate lines. So I'm just going to quickly change this to 1VW and 1VW, which should be smaller than what it currently is and scalable. So it should give us more room while still actually maintaining proper distance. No, that just makes it look horrible. Okay. So for now, I am going to just comment this whole thing out and come back to it later if I need it. Okay, so going with the defaults here, we want to break these two onto separate lines. Not in there, we need to go here. So in between here and here, we need to check if it's part of our group dinner, and if not, do something different. So if mi category category set to group dinner. And I do not need that much space. Then call is set to call XS6, sorry, XS12, else call is equal to call dash XS6. And then here we replace this with call. Save. And I'm going to also give it a center tag or center class, which if you notice I put the proper spelling of center, and then in our CSS I'm going to create that class. I don't need this one anymore. Dot center. Actually, I'm going to add that up here with my other ones here, with the formatting ones. Dot center, text align, center, important, and refresh. And now both of these lines are just centered, so they don't look as awkward. Now on the actual menu, they had the price at the bottom for these ones. I could do some more work to get that to happen, but realistically, there's no point in doing that. They also had it aligned to the bottom. I could do that, but realistically, I think it honestly looks better like this than trying to step them from the top and align them all to the bottom. Because this way, if you're trying to add stuff, you can see the prices all aligned, which again, they had the prices at the bottom, so they did. But yeah, I'm going to keep it like this. They also had the numbers as numeric values. I have it written out, but I assume if you can read a menu, you can read numbers. So not a big deal. Alright, so now the only other thing that they had was the tags. So I'm going to add the tags. So the only one that they actually had was hot, which meant spicy. So I am going to just look for some kind of icon that says spicy. Oh look, there we go. Our classic pepper. So just copying that guy, go back into here and into our menu. And hit enter there. I can actually put this right at the top. So I'm just going to call this hot. space before and after. Class is equal to, oh, sorry, I didn't even have to put in the I tags, just paste that in. Val large. I'm not going to worry about the fixed width. And then after this, or I guess even before it here, I'm going to add the bootstrap text danger to make it red. Okay, so we have our hot, so, and what that indicates, and then we just need to add that. Sorry, I'm going to have to cut it from there. I am going to have to put it in our code here. So before we write the name, so the name here, right after that is hot. So we're going to add it there. So now before we paste that, so before our M row, right here, if mi tags in array, sorry, in underscore array, and tags, which is a comma separated value, so we break that out. String get CSV. Now, because my tags, I literally just have the one that marks it whether or not it's hot, and I used the word hot, I do believe. I can double check that. Yes, hot. Because that's the only one I have, I don't need to go through this process, but because I want to make it future-proof, where if they add other tags, then it will accommodate that without having to write this extra code anyway. So basically we take our tags value, create it into an array, and then we check to see if it's in the array. So if hot, so if hot is in this array, then hot is equal to that, else hot is equal to nothing. And it was giving me the red because I was missing a parenthesis there. So if I save that now, because this is flags, not tags, sorry, flags. Save that, go to our page, refresh it, and there we go. Now that is too big. We want to make that icon quite a bit smaller. So I did have this as fat large. I'm going to change that to fat small because I'm guessing that even the regular sized one is going to be too big. Going to refresh that, and yeah, that's a lot better. That is quite a bit better. It is kind of a shame that almost wondering if I can get away with making this field larger than this field. Because I feel that I probably can, so I'm going to flirt with that. So I need to make these call 1 and call 2. Call 1 is set to call 2, which is set to that. So this one will just make them both that. And then this one I can do separately. Call 1 is 7, and call 2 is equal to extra small dash 5. So I'm giving, instead of making it split straight down the middle, I'm giving the first column, the name, a little bit of more space, basically just one more column. I just need to make sure that that's not going to completely screw over our prices. They break out onto that second line fairly nicely. So yeah, I'm going to keep it like that. That is much nicer. And my peppers look nice. Okay, perfect. So while that was a significant amount of work, we are almost done. Going on now, we need to make all this do stuff. Okay, so there's just a couple more things I wanted to mention before we call it a night. So with the soups, because there are 2 soups for wonton soup and war wonton soup listed with different prices, because we don't actually list the sizes here, and the sizes are what make that difference. We got a small and a large and a small and a large here. I went ahead and just added that to the name, so that way it shows up on the menu here. So I'll just refresh that. So there we go. So it just shows small, large, so people understand why there's 2 being listed there. It shouldn't be an issue anywhere else, because those were the only ones where on the menu it was literally written in 2 lines, or in a single line where they had 2 prices. So we just broke that out onto 2 separate and did that. So that will help differentiate that. And then the other thing is we didn't create anything to indicate our choices between the 2. So I just want to quickly go ahead and create some code for that. Okay. So here where we have our menu item number, we need to do something if the MI has those breaks. So if MI dollar, so if string str in parentheses $M capital I, comma, single quotes, and in the single quotes are vertical bar, end parenthesis, MI is equal to explode, and in the explode, vertical bar, comma, mi. So what this will do is it will explode or create an array out of a string. The first value is the separator and the second value is the string. So we're just going to replace the string mi with an array mi that has the variables within there. So then we should have 3 variables instead of just the 1. I'm going to change this to MIO, sorry. And then just write MI for each MIO as MIO all lowercase and then copy this paste it into there. Or paste that. This is me01. Oh, sorry. We don't need this for each. Okay, so this is Mio0. This is Mio0. This one is Mio1. And this one is Mio1. And while Mio(n) is equal to 0, while Mio(n) is less than Mio(2), Mio(n) plus plus. Do that. Else do that. Save. Back in here, refresh. And there we go. So now we get egg roll or wonton soup. Now because that is kind of awkward, I'm going to do a manual break after the egg roll or. So after our or, because our line break has to have the double quotes and we're using single quotes. And refresh. Refresh. Did I not save it? I did. So if that didn't work, then I'm going to manually break this. Refresh. There we go. So egg roll or wonton soup, egg roll or wonton soup. And I'm just going to add a strong to this, which more or less replaces bold. So that we know it's one or the other. Really emphasize that or. And there we go. So now when we click on it, we'll have an option to select one or the other, or we'll have little buttons, but we'll do that when we get to the next one.